Already. Alright, YouTube tells me YouTube tells me it has some buffering going. I want to make not the case of the moment. I think we're fine. I'm like 90% sure we're fine. I have one way of verifying. Anyways, there's a bunch of people in here to start off with. How's everybody doing tonight? Yeah, there we go. Connected. Kind of sounds like I am a little less present, voice-wise. Yusugi, nice to see you. Same with you, Durian. I saw you in here earlier. Alright, so what? I'll put these on for the duration. I have an eye doctor appointment coming up soon, so I'll be able to reach my prescription sunglass wearing. There's like no buffer on this. It's like a 5-second buffer. Tops. I'll tell you what, I can use my phone to keep an eye on chat, I think. I could probably do it with... Juggling a bit much, should be clear in 15. Good, 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 good. If I bring this right over here. Oh, that's perfect. I can check out chat on that side. That'll be perfect. Okay, so what are we talking about? We had a few different topics for tonight's list. Now, bourbon here, I just had some cheese, a little bit of food. Probably not going to eat at this point. But anyways, point being, we had a little bit of... I still got this cough I'm dealing with. So we had some feedback on our Warfare playtest. Yusugi was the one who playtested the rules. Actually did some solo wargaming, handled both sides, which was pretty interesting, and I enjoyed watching him do that. Not going to go over the recording tonight, but we are going to go over some of the feedback, some of the math behind the system, and some things that would make it a little bit more elegant and fit, I think, a little more neatly within 5th edition, which is already a little bit of a stretch or a tall order to make mass combat work in 5th edition. But 2, to make the system work on its own and fit a little bit more with the expectations, not just of people who are used to wargaming, but with folks who are who are expecting a wargame experience. You know, 5th edition, for all of its faults, I usually say this is an insult. It's a game that's trying to simulate the feeling of playing D&D, but it's that insult aside, it's a pretty big compliment if you think about it, or at least it's something of an interesting achievement that somebody could simulate the feeling of doing something without actually letting you do it. It's kind of worth examining, I think, how they managed to do that, how they managed to accomplish the feeling of playing D&D without actually letting you play D&D, and maybe this is dangerous, taking a similar approach when it comes to the war game. Not because I would like you to feel like playing a war game without actually playing a war game, but because I would like you to play a war game and feel like you are playing a war game. And that is something that you could screw up. You can let somebody do something and make it not feel like they're doing it. Or at least give them some plausible deniability. Authoritative News Network, nice to see you, buddy. So yes, Yusugi played through the... No worries. Cool. So Yusugi playtested it. I've been making changes all morning and well, I shouldn't say all morning, all afternoon rather. And I've also been making some changes to my dungeon tables because I ran a sort of tutorial dungeon. It's not tutorial for the players, it's a tutorial for referees. A tutorial dungeon last night for 3 of my players. This is the follow-up to the session where the players were traveling through the woods. They were looking for a library that they had to find the dungeon in question that I ran last evening. But they got sidetracked and decided to help a little plant mushroom critter that was stranded without his pod on the side of the road and ended up killing I almost said murdering, but killing a banshee and some hags and setting a cottage on fire. I think they put the fire out. So that was the second thing that we do. It looks like the chat is actually properly scrolling now, and now I can actually keep an eye on it. It's a little annoying that it's taking this long to get a full hold of it, but anyways. So I've got Canva open. That's not what I want. There's library late fees. I'll open that in a separate tab. And then what I probably want to do is start going over the warfare thing. What do you guys want to do first? Do you want to talk? Hey, Brown Wizard Winston. I'm going to be reviewing that guy's. Well, technically speaking, I'm going to be reviewing one of his modules twice. I'm going to review one of my initial impressions of it, and then I'm going to review how it plays because I'm going to attempt to play it for my players with understandable all the caveats of, hey, this is a high-level game, the PCs in this game are starting at 8th level, and some of them have reached almost, I think Para is still the highest level player character, sitting at about, I think she's still level 15, so all the caveats that come with that. I think there's a lot of adventure, and I say this having now run a lot more high-level 5th edition than most people do, than practically anybody does, because I'm doing it in a grand campaign, right? I'm doing it in something that started as a West Marches and has evolved further beyond that. But with that experience, there's a lot of adventure qualities, and that's kind of the idea behind this dungeon. There's a lot of adventure qualities that, regardless of level, just kind of work. They're satisfying to engage with, regardless of whether or not the PCs are struggling against it, or whether they have the proper spells or hit points or skill checks to bypass it. So it's an interesting discussion. But I don't know if I could put. I don't think I can do polls in here. I can do polls in here. Say what? Alright, so this will be the question. Warfare Dungeon talk first. We'll dump that in the chat. Perfect. And then I am going to go to my, we'll go to the share document first, because I've started doing my stuff in Canva instead of Homebrewery. No disrespect to Homebrewery, I like the fact that I like having the standard or the default typeset and fonts and stuff like that. I love having the HTML tables, and that's the one thing that Canva has not been able to replicate, but once I figure that out, whether I have to do it in some other program and then kind of screen cap it and shove it back over or whatever, I'm going to be done with Homebrewery for the foreseeable future. I just don't have enough control over the layout. All right, the vote is for dungeons so far, sitting at about 100%. Let's see. Make sure that the audio is still keeping up. Yeah, we're still doing fine. I want to make sure, because I've been hashing apart clips of my live streams and appearances on other people's live streams and few of my videos as well for TikTok, because that's where I'm going to be uploading for a little while until I get some more video scripts ready for the long form content. We have that, and people are still voting dungeon. Do you want me to send you a copy of the module? Yes, I would like that. That'd be perfect. Dundermoose and I were talking about that earlier today, and the question of objectivity was raised when it comes to, it's always risky when you receive a review copy, or people like to say that it's risky when you receive a review copy. It's like, oh, you got this thing for free. Doesn't that influence your opinion of it somewhat? I mean, I could see how it might affect somebody's opinion of something, but that is counterbalanced by my natural instinct or urge to be rude to people who've made something badly. And something, and who I think I could do better than. So that's, I feel like that's okay. What's that? Copy of companions. All right, I'm gonna jump in here. I'm gonna edit you. And this will be my warfare doc. Warefare. A warehouse. I almost typed warehouse in the thing. There we go. Let's get rid of it. And this too. Okay. Dungeons in, let's see here. I think it can for sure, but so can paying for it. Well, the idea behind paying for a module for a review copy, or paying for a review copy, which wouldn't make it a review copy, but paying for a copy that you were going to review, there we are, we untangled ourselves eventually, is that it will influence you maybe in a slightly more negative direction, because you'll be like, oh, I paid $60 for this item, I feel like I didn't get $60 worth of product, or maybe this would have been really good at $30, or maybe I'm so upset at having paid $60 that my entire view of this module is now negative. I think that's less of an issue when it comes to PDFs, especially because they tend to be on the cheap end. But at this point, I tear apart plenty of stuff that I get for free because yar har or something like that, and I'm just happy to tear bad art a new one, right? I'm not going to be paying for ISOM issue 1. That's an upcoming live stream, not reviewing ISOM, but reviewing my own comic book that I put out a few years ago, as well as my own book. And just redlining the entire thing, because I think I did that book badly. It was my first book. It was my first narrative book, I should specify. But it was my first book. How was I not going to do that badly? There's all these subtleties to writing, and like the fact that yes, there's a sensation in my head that feels really good when I'm writing, and I hope that my reader has that same sensation in my head. But if I'm not putting the correct words on the page to invoke that sensation, I can't just hope that it's going to like beam out of my head and into the readers. That doesn't work. A lot of people are doing this nowadays when they're trying to write quote pulp. When it comes to, I mean, that was the whole deal with ISOM, was like, oh, who knows what his powers are? Who knows what's this? Who knows what this detail is? Who knows what that detail is? And you're just left with this big pile of mush and unanswered questions about uninteresting characters and an uninteresting world, because there's no hook to it. I've been given no secure information. If it's beating around the bush about who even the bad guy is, when like when the big bad evil guy is being presented as such, and doesn't even have the strength to convey to me or to commit to, yeah, this guy's the bad guy and he's bad because X reason, or maybe the main character knows he's a bad guy and can characterize him as such. You always said you would do evil stuff to get rich, blah blah blah. That's a Dick Masterson line, I guess. Um, then I have nothing to work with. I'd rather just go read something else. Um, sure, there are books that don't do this, right? Roger Zelazny's Nine Princes in Amber begins with Corwin, our hero, not knowing his own name. He starts the book off with amnesia. But the thing is Roger Zelazny is a writer. He's a writer proper, and he's a really good one. He's experienced, and the exceptions to these rules, to my mind, just kind of stand on their own, and you shouldn't be trying to replicate them. I shouldn't be trying to replicate the mystery of Nine Princes in Amber. I should try to replicate the Tower of the Elephant or something like that when it comes to the book that I wrote and then the comic I did, Eyes of the Forest. It should just start off with action, telling you who the bad guys are, what's going on, and making that part satisfying to read. And then once I've confirmed that the details once I've confirmed that the details of the narrative are satisfying to read through and satisfying to enjoy, I can then look at how I might scale them back a bit, pull just ever so slightly behind the curtain, in a way that the reader was still attracted to them, but now also had this sense of mystery that was dragging them along. I used to say with pride about how I had accidentally structured Eyes of the Forest like a detective novel or a mystery, and it turns out that's actually a bad thing. That's a massive mistake I made on my part because it doesn't have the qualities of a mystery, or it doesn't have the clues and stuff that you would draw in for a mystery. There's just my allure and my pride at having built a world that doesn't translate to the reader who is expecting some kind of recompense for the time spent reading this little 37,000 word novelette. Hmm. I seem to be frozen? I don't seem to be frozen. I'm pretty sure I'm not frozen. Okay. I don't know when I went frozen or for how long. I appreciate you telling me. There is not an audio version of Eyes of the Forest. Um, Frozen for a bit there. I don't like that. I'm looking back. I can't find the point where I was frozen, which is good. Maybe it was just on your end. I mean, I believe you, but oh, thank you. I'm glad that you appreciate my views on writing. They're not entirely my views. A great portion of that redlining stream is going to focus on Dick Masterson and his critiques of the whole ISOM comic because he's an actual writer. He's not just a comedian; he's also a writer. He's had TV shows go to production. I don't think that they made it past that, but they went to production. That's impressive. That's more than 99.999% of people get ever. So obviously worth examining at the very least, or bouncing the ball back and forth with somebody who has artistic criticism, is talking about things that are objective. Or sorry, not objective. Things that are important when it comes to communicating art and its value and the your intent behind creating it to begin with, which is where stuff like the dungeon discussion comes in. So, library late fees is intended to be part of Book 1 of Witch King's Rhyme. Shelmus Valley has 3 different main campaigns. The one that kicks off the whole ordeal is Witch King's Rhyme. Witch King's Rhyme has 5 books to it. Those 5 books are organized by the focus of the quests that pop up and are made available to the players. Um, and a rough track of events and describing the way that these events can change based on the most likely outcomes. Just to give the sort of put a little bit of training wheels on for the GM that slowly, for the referees, I should say plural, that slowly fall off as they continue more and more through these campaigns and the player shenanigans and the resulting the resulting deviancies from the books get more and more insane. They grow more confident in their ability to just kind of like take the campaign, or not even take the, to follow the campaign where it's going and follow those most active, most proactive, most elite players, I guess, into wherever it is that they're going. Because they don't have to wait till book 5 to kill Witch Kings of Fane, realistically speaking. They don't have to wait until book 5 to kill the Shigorath. No, it's not Shigorath. Shivagroth. At the northern end, this aberration that's empowering this ice-themed Fae and turning him insane. They don't have to wait for any of these particular books. They don't have to wait for the proper sequence of events. But if I'm writing these books in such a way that if they are riding with these training wheels again, they're going to be a little bit more familiar with what the book is asking them of, or what the campaign is asking of them, such that they can replicate that in the future. And that's the purpose of library late fees. There's a very simple quest. There's some very simple locations. It's realistically speaking 2 locations, and anything that you happen to find in between. And after that, it is a jumping off point for adventures into the Underdark, or the Underworld as it's called. It's a jumping off point for learning about how to use the random tables, because you're provided a layout first, a description of rooms first, and then there's all these traps and encounters that you can place, and then you get into the random dungeon generation, because you could generate exits that go beyond the dungeon's initial borders. And these are intended to carry you further and further into the world, into the Underworld, until you eventually reach the Underworld itself, right? The Underworld proper, not just levels further and further down until you reach, like, maybe there's a settlement underneath, or maybe there's a nefarious monster underneath, or maybe one of these many natural wonders of the world that's included in the module for you to place somewhere happens to be under there. But I'll respond to those comments in just a moment. So those are the training wheels. You have an initial layout. You know how to develop an initial layout, because it could be simple as a grid that you filled out. Just a 5x5 A1, from A1 to E5 down here. You can make a grid, and then you could follow the random dungeon generation, the random terrain generation, and random contents all throughout. Having been given a theme to the dungeon, some mechanics that work with it, maybe a unique condition or some unique magic items and encounters as a result, and knowing why it's there. And at that point, you can, if you understand why these components are in place and why they work so well together, as they did last night, because by God, it was killer, then my assumption is you could go on and you could replicate that process on your own for the entirety of the valley. And that takes me off the hook for having to write a dungeon for every single hex out of the entire valley, which I can't, because it's 100 hexes long by 50 hexes wide. And I would not even want to do 1/10 of that, because that would be a total of 500 dungeons. And we quite frankly just don't have room in the book for that. We don't have room in the book for the book. The encounter manual is already 185 pages. The book descriptions, which are not even the quests themselves, but just give you instructions on how to place the quests and how to do them in sequence. They give you recommendations like, here are the emissaries that can bring this quest to the player's attention. And this lets you use certain NPCs. And okay, if Corgan the Wizard is out of play, like let's say he's dead, because somebody killed him, maybe another patron killed him, or maybe one of your players killed him or something, or maybe he's just out of commission for some reason, then this other person can tell the players about it. But if this other person comes and tells the players about it, maybe they have some nefarious intent, or maybe they're doing it at the behest of a different patron, or maybe you could use a patron to bring this quest to the player's attention, or maybe you just hand the quest to the patron, and then the patron decides maybe which players he wants to deliver them to. And that's the kind of advice that goes through that. All of that alone is like stacking up pages. Because Witch King's Rhyme has 5 books. There's a, what is it? The Mall Below, which is about the deep elf houses rising up and sinking hexes of the surface into the underworld. And then there's, that's 3 books. And then there's From East Comes Fire, which is, I think it's just 1 book. That one, because that's mostly about the mechanics of it, like spreading and warfare spreading throughout the valley. And it's not something the players are going to engage with much unless the frost has pushed them all the way down to the bottom of the valley, which I'll explain later. And if through the course of Witch King's Rhyme, the quote, the default bad guy faction, the default enemy faction, has pushed the players adventuring opportunities and locales further down the valley. And what that necessitates is I have a more sparsely populated points of light setting that that is ripe for the GM to populate themselves with these sort of templated mini adventures. And this is one such one. Let's see here. It's more of a primer than a module. No, Chomas Valley is a module. All of the primary quests, they flow together in a specific way that works together as a module. You could follow them step by step if you wanted to. I guess somebody, a referee who is particularly heavy-handed, could like keep trying to. No, that wouldn't work. The players have too many resources in the module for a referee to realistically keep them on track. But it does explain. It's just a module that explains how players can change the sequence of events and change the events. So I don't know if that counts as a module, because apparently people haven't been doing that often. Except for Isle of Dread, which you could drop into this module, I guess. The map is big enough. So what do we got? Okay, I like your views on writing, very concise. I agree with Isom, the art is good, the writing is lacking. Yeah, that's kind of the idea. And that's what there's that again. That's what I want to avoid with library late fees and all the quote default quests in Witch King's Rhyme. Book 1 of Witch King's Rhyme is just the setup. Okay, the players are not aware that frost is going to begin spilling out from the top of the valley and start moving down at a rate of 1 hex per week, which I need to do. I need to spread my hexes all over. I've been lax in ways I shouldn't have been. Oh, you're gonna do this again to me. Okay, that's better. Yes, there's a couple modules there that aren't looked properly. So these all need to spread out. Maybe I'll do that tonight, maybe not. Let's see, it sounds interesting, a lot of pieces. There are. Thunder, it's nice to see you, buddy. Same for Red 1. Lemon and honey tea. Put some bourbon in there. I was sick when we went to South Padre Island. Which I didn't mention to anybody. I was trying to hold in. No, I think I mentioned it to my... I think I mentioned it to my Lancer players. I was like, there's not going to be a session today. But an old-fashioned or a hot toddy. If you have the ingredients to make a hot toddy, you just need like a cinnamon stick. Realistically, you don't even need a cinnamon stick. It's just going to make it easier to digest. You could just dump cinnamon straight into it. But if you do that, you can, if there's that again. If you do that, you can sweat it out pretty quickly. Let's see here. I'm doing a talk for learning and development people tomorrow on what we could learn from the history of D&D. Called Game Meets Gygax. It's interesting. No, and it's the subject of learning what we can from the 1E books is the subject of tonight. So, I have library late fees. I have a little bit of quest information. There we go. I have a quest giver, Elder Krontimon. That's my non-copyright word for ent or treant. Or Trent, if you pronounce it that way. So I went with my usual, just Irish or Gaelic corruptions. Reward, elemental spells and minions, new subject of research. Research is a downtime action in Chilmus Valley. It's one of the reasons why I can't keep the players and you can't keep your players on a specific track, because they have too many different ways of learning new information and thus places to go adventure and mess up your plot or plan. Locations, we have Morgalic Library, and which is Irish corruption for moon. And Israfel's Library. Then we have a summary here. Elder Krontimon, tender of the Morgalic Library, has awoken to discover one of her precious tomes has not been returned. Her quest is simple. See the book returned. Right, so we have a little bit of a fetch quest. There's a lady, she owns powerful things. She doesn't have a lot. She doesn't have a lot to offer you in terms of information about the current state of the world, but she does have a little bit to offer you in terms of she's obviously a valuable potential future ally. And it just so happens that the book you're about to go look for is something that has to do with the elements, and a book about the elements might be useful when the frost begins spilling over from the north of the valley and coming downwards. But the players don't know that yet. They're just learning about the exploration system. They're learning maybe how warfare works. Not really, that's more of a book 2 thing. They're learning how to use their secondary classes, and they're learning how to do their downtime actions. So this is also sort of priming the player characters on just how far this module is going to unleash them. Just how much, like, the reins have been taken off. Taking off the reins? I don't know if that word. That sounds like I've been screwing up an aphorism, and I hate aphorisms to begin with. That's not great. Yes, we have this area here, and then we have a swampy area here. Fantastic. Tord Demerai, was that? No, Tord Neumann is the Spider Hollow. And this one, I think, just belonged to a Banshee. It might have belonged to the Banshee that they killed over in this hex. I'm not sure, though. Secondary classes. Off the leash! Yeah, that's the idea. Bumper bowling gutters have been lifted. Yeah, so secondary classes are a function of Chilmus Valley. They give you an extra resource called Class Dice. They give you a bunch of mostly non-combat abilities that don't really mesh with the 5th edition classes, or wouldn't fit with the 5th edition class. So I said, okay, if I just accept that the 5th edition classes are combat-focused, combat-based, and every time they deviate from that design principle, they mess it up, I can make secondary classes that you can just paste onto your character. They go right with your full class, they don't change leveling or anything like that. It's just a second spread of talents that have to do with non-combat, that have a non-combat focus to them. Once I did that, I found all these new things fit into the 5th edition framework, or into the RPG framework, really. Nothing special about 5th edition here. It's raining. That would be fun to engage with, like animal taming. Somebody who specializes in exploration. We would have hoped that would be the ranger, but eh. And I could build new modes of play around those critters as a result. If I knew that I had a secondary class, or if I knew that somebody would have a spread of features or spread of talents that focused on taming animals, I could include individual rules or entries for taming individual creatures in the encounter manual, which is exactly what we did. Anybody would be able to engage with them, but the person who was good at animal taming would be able to do that. And that's where I should use a different example. Like, we have a research downtime action that lets you just collect information out of the ether, either by hitting the books, or asking around, or engaging in some divination, or I think the last one is seek within, which is try to remember things that you forgot. Try to remember things, your character trying to remember things that the player forgot. And there's a secondary class called Scholar, and the Scholar is mostly about creating scrolls and messing around with scrolls, but they also have some features that pertain to research. So now this person's going to get a little bit of training when it comes to the library, assuming they collect their reward. We go back here. I have a small description for, I'll probably expand on this a little bit, for they entering the library for the first time, especially during book 1. I might have a small note in there about what happens if the players encounter this library in later books, because right now my players are technically speaking in book 3 or 4. At least. There's the There we go. Starfruit Honey is Otter Star, my highest level player in the West Marches. Ran the Grand Campaign, playing Para the Cleric, who is an herbalist. That's a pretty common ask, I think. People want to play an alchemist, people want to play herbalist and stuff like that. My first Kickstarter was for an alchemist class for 5th edition, so I'm pretty familiar with the concept. And when I fit it in as a secondary class, all of a sudden, like, yeah, just by traveling or if you spend time traveling or you spend time foraging, you're gonna find these little alchemical reagents sitting there waiting for you. People loved it. Let's see here. I spliced the... Oh, there we go. I spliced in the Grim Hollow backgrounds to bump up the 5e backgrounds and active and passive ability, and some domain-focused advancements. Grim Hollow was, I think, developed like in parallel to Chilmus Valley, and it was interesting. I think my DM Matt was including Grim Hollow. No, he was including Grim Hollow content in his campaign at the time. Before I moved down to Texas, and I'm pretty sure that specific campaign is still ongoing. I think they ran into a standstill because the characters are about to get killed. You know. Ranger is probably the least combat focused. Wish that wasn't the case. That'll be a subject for a different stream. Alright, so I have a little bit of dialogue options here. I find this useful for characterizing whatever NPC the players are talking to, and sort of not just for the players themselves, but also for the referee, so they know how much information this person has. I think it's cool if you have the opportunity to say, this person has this information, this other person has this other information. Maybe you have to make a choice between them, or maybe you have to, in order to squeeze information out of one NPC over another, it takes different resources or material costs or whatever. And that's gameplay, is making choices. So that's why what is it? Baldur's Gate and Planescape Torment and Icewind Dale and stuff like that are memorable and fun, and nobody really remembers Skyrim quests. Because there's some exclusivity to the gameplay results of those quests, and we don't really replicate that in tabletop RPGs. But it's on everybody's mind right now, because of Baldur's Gate 3, because we have yet another in our 50 years of great examples, or sorry, I guess 30 years of great examples. Pong doesn't really count, but in our 30 years of great examples of quests that work both in video games and in tabletop RPGs, would work better in tabletop RPGs if we knew what made them work in video games to begin with. It's on everybody's mind right now, so now I have the chance to kind of like grab everybody's attention and say, here, this is what you do. Okay, so like, how long has the Morgellons library stood? The players probably aren't going to ask that question directly. They didn't ask that question directly, but they did ask something else that let her give this answer. I'm 1,300 years old. 3 of my kind tended the library for their lifespans before me. I think it used to be bigger. One of the pieces of information the players come into the valley knowing is that the local fae are fleeing the valley for unknown reasons. And that sucks. It's ruined everybody's good time because most of the rangers, druids, shamans, whatever you have here, were relying on bargains with the Fae to keep their magic going. Now they don't have their magic, they need to call adventurers from foreign lands because they can't defend their towns, communities, or whatever anymore. So they need new adventurers. That's the entire premise behind your players being there. And she doesn't know why the Fae are fleeing. She goes, well, she woke up more or less because a bunch of her attendants ran off. And she has no idea why. But she can't care about that right now because she just woke up and a bunch of stuff is missing from her library from people who've never returned their books. That's why it's called library late fees. But she's not going to tell you. Third question, which tomes are missing? I'll keep mine. She uses a word. A fake word that translates to cards, leaves, or tarot, depending on context. Close to her chest for now. Find my first book, and I'll be happy to talk further. So now the GM has been exposed to a means of specifying. The GM has been, or sorry, the referee, I gotta stop saying GM. The referee has been exposed to a means of keeping or a justification for keeping information closer to their chest. They don't just have to info dump everything that they see in the book, which gives them a little bit of a buffer to improvise or justify new explanations for why things might be the way they are. Which is important, because one of the biggest sources of GM inspiration, or just lore period, is stuff that the players are saying. Because they speculate, and I do this, everybody does this, I don't know anybody who doesn't do this. Sometimes the speculations of what players come up with is pretty reasonable, and that gets added to the narrative, added to the lore, and added to the game post hoc. Yeah, no new comments at the moment. Fine. I do wonder if this is a little bit too... One second. Dunham says he's got a call at night. He's looking forward to Wednesday. Yeah, you too, buddy. Yeah, I'll keep that like that for... I'll keep the chat like that for a moment. I want to make sure it's actually, like, legible. Okay, and then we come to just very simply... So we have those dialogue options. I might add more to them. Probably will. Might add a little bit more description. And then we come to the library. And I don't have a lot of descriptions of the individual rooms right now. I'm probably not going to go super in-depth on them. I'm just going to describe things of importance or overall themes of an individual room, like the phrase study nook conjures an image of lush curtains and cushions and an ottoman and a stack of books. And that's something the players can be comfortable visualizing in their head. And that's something the referee can also, because he can visualize it as well, can be comfortable improvising content as a result. But that's not where this starts. We have just a few of my notes. So I have a unique dungeon condition. Didn't really come up last night. Called, and it might have had I been more prepared. We'll talk about this. Called Elemental Tithes, and it says every time the players defeat an elemental encounter through combat, a monster is added to another encounter of a matching elemental type. So one of the first encounters the players had, if I go over to Israfel's library over here, I don't really have to worry about spoilers because the players explored every single room except for one. E3 was the only one they avoided. Alright, here we go. I rolled up room contents. There was a little elemental encounter here, a bunch of water elementals hanging out in a somewhat unnatural pond being fed by a spring from somewhere above the dungeon's roof and draining further off into the dungeon itself. There's a bunch of water elementals here, so if they defeated these guys with combat, I would have gone to the next elemental, water elemental encounter. I would have added like another steam method to it. Let's see. Yeah, see you later, authoritative. A&N. So that's the first bit of the condition. The second bit of the condition is every time an encounter is bypassed through non-combat means, a monster is instead added to an encounter of a non-matching elemental type. So if they made friends with the water elementals, they got an initial reaction that was, I believe, uncertain, 55% chance negative. And the players, what was it? I think it was Nessie playing Mimosa, offered these elementals some candy, and we rolled again, and they got a positive result. And I was like, okay, so they were friendly. In fact, they were so friendly. I think it was initially like 45, and then the next roll was 97 or something like that on the D100 table. And so obviously this comes out to this end poll. That's fine. So obviously the players or obviously these guys are fine with the players at the moment. They weren't able to communicate with any of these elementals. They didn't have any languages in common, but you know they were happy to hang out, and so that would count as bypassing an encounter. So if it came up to like an encounter that was fire themed, I would go one more Magmin or something like that. And we have contents and encounters. So this section presumes that there are encounter tables for 2 regions, one dungeons. There's already an encounter table for dungeons, and there's encounter tables for the world below, or the underworld. I have to... How many different appellations can I come up for the Underdark while avoiding trademark dispute? Product identity. And this says, hey, this uses the normal encounter tables for dungeons, but it has some small changes to it. Number 1 is encounter results of 1 through 5 in the D and E rooms, that's on the 2nd floor of the dungeon, are taken from the underworld encounter tables instead. That's because there's a hole to the underworld in them. And in any randomly generated encounters below these rooms, which implies that there's a space to adventure below these rooms, this instead applies to results 1 through 10. And any results from a dungeon encounter table have an elemental attunement, represented by an appropriate template selected from the encounter manual, like Rhymeborn for creatures made of frost. So there's a chance of you still coming up with the regular, instead of making a table of elementals, which I could still do, theoretically, but instead of doing that, rolling on a normal table that had orcs, gnolls, goblins, sprites, fairies, pixies, boggarts, whatever have you, it would be those, except they were made of fire, or made of water, or made of lightning, or something. And that would be fun, because it's a dungeon, quite literally made by a wizard. I can put who's had a little bit of elemental power gone awry in this place. I can get away with that. It's quite literally a wizard did it. I don't know when a wizard did it became this joke for weirdos and idiots in the RPG hobby about why a dungeon wouldn't make sense or why it would be dumb to adventure through. I assume it's the same kind of people who look and sneer at the concept of saving a princess as being the basis for an adventure or something like that. Those people are dumb. Just ignore them, okay? This is cool stuff, and they don't know how to replicate cool stuff, so they sneer at it and produce trash in response, or nothing at all. So, half of generated treasure results are instead fable books, which can be used to absorb elemental encounters. That's described in the next little section. And then, all secret doors are trapped, and all unmarked or closed exits are secret. So those are our like modifiers, basically, on the random generation of the dungeon. It's like we're playing a roguelike. We haven't gotten rid of the random encounter tables because we want some deviance from the random encounter tables. Instead, we've said, okay, we're still using the random encounter tables and the random generation, but we're going to apply these small modifiers to them so that to make like a unique location for adventure, rather than while maintaining the fact that this is a place for adventure, that the referee is not exerting total control over, or total really any control over, realistically speaking. They are still, much in the same way the players are, discovering the dungeon as it goes along and keeping them on their toes. Maybe not at the same time. My recommendation is still going to be roll up the encounters before you actually get in here. Um, but it's a little bit easier to get away with that. That maybe the person isn't used to prepping, maybe they're nervous about it, but what is it? Yeah, maybe they're nervous about prepping. Maybe they have like an ADHD brain like mine, and they don't feel like doing it. Maybe prepping in the middle of the week feels like takes 10 hours as opposed to doing it at the table, which feels like it takes 10 seconds. Really, it takes 10 minutes, which sucks for the players. But what can you do? If it feels like it takes 10 hours during the week, you're just not going to do it at this point. Referees can't be trusted with even the simplest tasks. So. Um, but that's why the dungeon layout has been made in advance, because when it comes to somebody like me who can't be screwed to roll up the encounters in advance, at the very least, if I have the layout rolled up in advance, it feels like the players still get to engage with their environment, even while they're still technically speaking, they're still able to play while they're technically speaking waiting for me to deploy the monsters, because they have skill check spells, stuff like that, that they know they could deploy and ask me about while I'm getting the monsters ready, which happened last night. Yeah, and all secret doors are trapped, all unmarked. Yeah, so we're not getting rid of secret doors. We're not saying that this dungeon is the entirety of the dungeon, what I've laid out for you so far. We're still going to go beyond it, but there's a bunch of secret stuff here, and this is how we're going to present it to the players. All right, questions. The Boogie Lands. That's truth. There's a reason classic stories have lasted so long. Yeah. One of my favorite people on Twitter right now is Ren Scarborough, who is writing a bunch of I gotta read her stuff on from her Substack again. I promised I would do that, and I didn't get back to it. But she's the one who wrote the thing about wanting dragon horror in films and in stories and in books and stuff like that again. And she writes primarily about fairy tales. And not just fairy tales, but as she will tell you, because she wrote about Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid, which to her is technically not a fairy tale. And she provides some pretty interesting justification for that opinion. But it inspired hawks like that, inspired dungeons like these. And the loot I'm about to read to you. Now, the whole point of bringing up Ren Scarborough was the idea that, like, yeah, these fairy tales, even when they're wrong in some sense, even when they get some virtue, some when they pose some vice as actually being a virtue, or lead people read lead their readers astray in some capacity, they still tug at the heartstrings of like what makes us human and what makes us tick in some sense, with the, like this sense of wonder that people have driven out of them from an early age, and what can let you hold on to that um, while you're observing the world. But, so yeah, princess stories, awesome, love them. So we have unique loot here, fable books. These books, with one exception, don't work outside Israfel's library. That's my big disclaimer first. When opened, remember, this is replacing like half of the treasure tables, or half of the treasure results. When opened, they act much like an iron flask, trapping affected creatures in a fairy tale or fable. All elementals and fae within 60 feet and not behind cover must make a DC 10 intelligence saving throw or be sucked into the book. Or each creature that let's see here. For each creature which fails, another is sucked into the book. So if there's like 3 creatures who fail and 1 who succeeds, that last one who succeeds still gets sucked into the book. And creatures within Israfel's library have disadvantage on their save, and that's to say, okay, most of these books don't work outside the library. There's one exception, which one of my players now has. It's the one who is playing a Fae, funnily enough. And it can be used to bypass encounters, which of course has an impact. If we go back up here, elemental tithes. Every time an encounter is bypassed through non-combat means, a monster is instead added to an encounter of a non-matching elemental type. So still an escalation going on within this dungeon in direct response to the player character's actions in a natural way. I shouldn't say a natural way. In a, what is the word here? This is not easy. In a mechanically satisfying way. I actually don't care if it has a narrative justification at all. I think it's fun. I think it's more importantly good gaming. More important than being fun. Has this direct feedback. It has this direct feedback loop with the players, which is something that people have not been able to replicate in most tabletop RPG encounters for 50 years. There's very few people who manage that. And my solution to it was putting conditions, environmental conditions, over the dungeons themselves. And then I have a unique encounter here called a fable, and there's not a lot written here, but the point of it was that there were different types of fables that the players could interact with, either by giving the subject of the fable something, like giving Robin Hood a bow, and a kiss on the cheek from Mary something, whatever her name was in that book, and giving him a bag of taxes. Let's see here. Oh, Durian, that's such a great. That's so fascinating. That's interesting. So, does it stack the following combat? It could. Yeah, it could absolutely stack the following combat if the following thing happens to be combat. No. If the following, yeah, whatever the following monster encounter is, there would be one more there. As a result, the idea being that like there's this scale that's constantly being tipped out of balance within the dungeon, and every time it goes one way, it overcorrects and dumps another monster into the dungeon, which is one justification for restocking the dungeon and the way in which it's done for a place that's a little bit more unique. Again, still operating within all of the different conceits for how dungeons are supposed to operate in the game, because we're gamists. We want to play a game, but we want to do it in a way, not that quote makes sense, because that's everybody's excuse for picking out all the cool gameplay mechanics, but in a way that the players can sort of anticipate future events and prepare and respond accordingly, or make choices accordingly. So if they know dungeons restock after a time, that's fine. It's okay if this dungeon restocks in a unique way, because that's not really the point of it. The players are still aware that, like, okay, dungeons restock, and even if this one does it in a way that we're not familiar with, we're still going to be ready for the fact that if we take a week break between our delve here, we're going to have to deal with new monsters probably. And during the sleepy said, let's see here. I'm imagining a giant suction tornado pulling in elementals and the victims grabbing onto each other, others in desperation pulling them in anyways. That's a fantastic way of describing it. That's a fantastic narration. And then Mr. Brown Wizard Winston asked if this is discoverable in any way. And the answer is a resounding yes. And in fact, the players did discover it beforehand. This ties into the 3 mechanics that are basically missing from 5th edition, but I've input in Chilmus Valley. A lot of Chilmus Valley has been creating the infrastructure or the architecture of a grand campaign that can support something on this big of a scope in spite of me not having enough money to produce it to begin with, or my co-writer for that matter. But okay, there's hirelings that you can pick up, and hirelings who are scholars or mages have instructions. All hirelings have this, of if they're of some import, if they're at least like a secondary class or a sidekick, as they're categorized. Both of those are basically subcategories of henchmen. You can think of them as over a hireling. They have instructions in their section for what they do during downtime, because they're not full player characters, but player characters do want to use them. So I just wrote down, okay, as long as they're being directed, or as long as somebody is aware of what they're supposed to be doing, they just kind of passively collect these downtime actions or these downtime results. And one of those is research. And obviously, with the research downtime action, you're pulling information out. And one of the player characters happened to have a 5th level mage with them, who took a downtime action in between sessions and said, because he had found some notes and he decided to study those notes. It was the perfect reasoning behind everything. And so I just posted a screenshot of this unique dungeon condition in the chat. It's in my Discord right now. I think if you look at you might need the adventurer's role to look at it, but I think it's in Samaid Boogaloo. Yep. I posted it on the 24th. So yeah, the players were able to find this. It was a discoverable mechanic because, again, I had the infrastructure for them to discover this, for the players to act as sages, or if they had brought sages with them, would be able to take advantage of them. Yeah, so the last thing was the Fable encounters. Every time the players went into a room, they saw all these books scattered across the library that were just covers, like all the pages had been ripped out of them, but they had no idea where the pages were. But every time they solved one of these Fable encounters by either aiding the subject in combat, the players couldn't participate in combat directly, but they were able to like cast spells on the hero or trip the villains that it was fighting, and they didn't use hit points, they used hits. That was one way of solving it. I don't think they encountered any like that. And then cooperation. The Fable requires a skill check to complete the scene, and that was something that happened. I think they came across Peter Pan playing on a piano, and obviously the bard joined in, and that's how they got another Fable. Every time they completed one of these, a stack of papers would appear next to them and flow into one of these flow into one of these book covers and reattach themselves and reform themselves. And that's when the cover would reappear, or the title would reappear on the cover. Very cool. So throughout the dungeon, they must weigh whether or not to do an encounter or to kick the can and have a larger encounter later. Maybe. Because here's the thing, we're still using AD&D reaction rolls. It's perfectly reasonable, and this happened many times throughout the course of the dungeon, that they rolled well on their reaction roll. And so some of those quote larger encounters ended up just being friendly. So yes, they are kicking the can down the road, but not in a way that necessitates that the eventual confrontation is going to be negative in some way. In a very real sense, it's actually probably easier, or they're even more incentivized to solve their encounters through non-combat means, because if they eventually come across a really big one that has a really big encounter as a result of their prior actions, they still have that great chance of turning up friendly. And if it doesn't turn up friendly by that point, then they have all these Fable books that they could just kind of unleash. In some ways, the dungeon is teaching them to skip encounters and to run through it as quickly as possible, by all means possible. Which is exactly what they did. Like, they ran through. Again, there's it's a 5x5 grid, so there's 25 rooms in total. And well, technically speaking, 25 rooms in total. This is more like the A. Yeah, this row is more like 3 rooms. These are the stairs that they went into. If they went up the stairs, they went into this section of the dungeon. If they went down the stairs, they went into this section of the dungeon. They didn't end up taking the stairs down into the second layer. What is it? I think this is C5. Yeah, C5 has windows from C4 and from B5 looking into it. It's a hole to the underworld. So they just opened the windows and swung on some rope downwards to get into this room, where they met an encounter that was not happy with them. I think Para cast darkness. One of these things tripped off the edge and fell downwards. That's one thing. And then they just started running through the rest of these rooms, locking doors behind them, setting up traps. They tried to convince the flail snails to be friendly with them. That went poorly. Went to this other room with a bunch of like wine weirds and a Zorn, and they had a bunch of gems on them that they had gotten earlier in the dungeon from a treasure result. So they just started tossing gems at the Zorn, and he was happy to. I think speaking with an Italian accent, it was happy to help them out. And they literally only didn't visit one room, which was this one. During the Sleepy has a very fun story about a friendly reaction roll encounter in a wizard's tower they told me about recently, which absolutely warmed my heart. It's one of those mechanics that just makes for these moments that make it clear why we're adventuring in a tabletop RPG as opposed to adventuring in a video game. Like makes it like crystal clear why we the advantage of doing it in one medium over another. It's fantastic. So while I'm training the referee to be quick and on their feet, and to probably roll a bunch of these different encounters or room contents in advance, while still giving them a little bit of a safety net, because they have the first 2 levels. Well, they have technically this is the A row is the first level, and then B and C are kind of top floor, because A is bisecting the top floor and the second level, and then you have the second level over here, D and E rows respectively. If the DM screws up, or if they're normally nominally slow when it comes to doing layout, but they're fast when it comes to just kind of dropping encounters on the board, like I am, then they have that safety net teaches them the value of one, doing the layout in advance. Because if they didn't have the layout here, they would have been screwed. And also, go ahead and do the encounters in advance too. If you have the time, do the encounters in advance. Prioritize the layout. But if you have some time left over, do the encounters in advance also, so that you could just drop them down on the table and be done with it. And then the players will do their improvisations, and neat moments or neat thoughts will crop up into your head along the way anyways. Little improvisations about what's going on with these flail snails. I don't know. Well, they're eating some scrap metal that's just kind of been like left behind for them. Perfect. Totally fine. You can still do all the things that you like. You can still do all the things that you like about random dungeon generation if you prep the encounters in advance. They're still going to come up. It's the part that you don't like doing. The part that you don't like doing is just doing stuff in advance, because it feels slow to you when you're doing it alone, and it feels faster and more entertaining and more fun when you have an audience, even as they're waiting 20 minutes for you to get a fucking CR5 encounter ready. After waiting 5 minutes to figure out what the room even looks like and how many exits there are. I get it, man. I like looking for player validation too sometimes. And the thought that they might not be having as much fun as me by watching me have fun, that also stings my narcissistic soul about how they should be having as much fun as I am by watching me have fun. I totally get it. But it doesn't make for a better game. So I just have to do better than that, you know? Anyways, so that's the idea behind the library. I think I decided the players did find the book that they were looking for. I called it Tuilerlach. Duillerach. Was a corruption of the Gaelic words for elemental and lake. And I told the players to translate it roughly to the font slash lake or pool of elemental power. And they believed me. So I guess it was named well. And, oh, we didn't go over the room contents. We'll go over that in a moment. But I decided that whenever I rolled for random contents, because I rolled for random contents for all of these rooms, but some of them had other stuff that was still in there that would just change the encounters that was like pre-prepped. That's redundant. That was prepped ahead of time. There's stuff in there that was prepped, and then there would also be a random contents roll to see what was going on. And then some of them also had random rolls for exits. Even though, again, they might have had an exit already in there, I would roll for more exits so I could see what kind of cool stuff might be lying beyond the borders of the dungeon that I had already laid out. And again, that's another tutorial or teaching moment for the referee. Say, okay, I had this layout, this was prepared, and now that I have this to fall back on, now that I have a space of adventure to fall back on, if I'm really bad at handling the random encounters outside, I could just say like, hey, we need to take a 15-minute break so I can get this stuff that you guys take a bathroom break. I'm gonna get this stuff together behind this wall ready here. Or there's a cave in or something like that if it's extreme, you're really doing bad. Why are you not basking in my majesty? Exactly. That's an interestingly placed comment there, or comma. I noticed that. But yeah, and this is how this is how the dungeon works. But I determined that when I rolled for random room contents, I was using. Let me scroll down here. That's why I was scrolling down. Here it is. This is not the Appendix A table. This is my table that I ended up using. The Appendix A table has a lot more empty results. Mine are 1 to 5. Appendix A is 1 to 12. Let's see here. Monster and Monster Plus Treasure are both roughly about the same in terms of total. But the biggest difference is that Trick or Trap and really 13 through 16 special / unique encounters, that is one result on the Appendix A table called which is 18. And it's not just special / unique encounters, it's also stairs. Because Gygax anticipated a problem when it came to including special or unique encounters in the dungeon that I didn't anticipate at all. I thought, I have so many ideas for cool and unique encounters I could do in this dungeon. Let me make sure that I have a range big enough that I could use all of them. But what I wasn't expecting, and I explained this in my Twitter thread, was I wasn't expecting to roll these 4 results for this range band of 4 like 6 times throughout the course of the night. I ended up outpacing what I thought my personal reserve of special and unique encounters was, and I did have to default to stairs for one of those encounters. So that was a bad idea. I'm definitely gonna revert that to like, yeah, you want to make sure that you get a special or unique encounter It would suck if you didn't have any of those, but worse still would be rolling this. Would be rolling this and and outpacing yourself, like rolling this like literally 6 times in a row. It'll be dumb. But what I decided was the one result that's identical here is 20, which is very simple, just treasure, no monster. I decided that the first room I rolled a 20 on would have the book in it. It would also have normal treasure, but I decided, all right, the first room in here is going to have the book in it. You got to roll a 20 eventually. And maybe I would put some advice in here for like, hey, if the players still haven't found because they could go, what is it? It's a 5x5 grid. Well, no, it's not technically a 5x5 grid. Technically, it's a 3x5 grid on one level and then a 2x5 grid on another. See, again. You could just not roll a 20, and the players. I could put some advice in there about going back and searching, and then just re-rolling to see if you got a 20 then, and that still probably wouldn't work. At the point at which people are backtracking through the dungeon, it should probably apply to something like any monster plus treasure result or any special unique encounters result, stuff like that. But that didn't happen. I rolled 20 like 3 times, I think, throughout the course of the dungeon. And the very first one was in the resting chamber, funnily enough. So if I scroll up, I think it's B1 here. Resting chamber. Yeah, I didn't even really have a description here. I think I just came up with one on the fly after resting chamber in the middle of the session. And I record my session, so I'll probably go back and just listen to whatever I said and put that back in here. Ditto for book checks, meeting chambers, courtesy desks, and bathrooms. I think the bathrooms had a trap in it, a cinder spout. It also had a secret door in it. Then that secret door led to another result that ended up being 13 through 16, special or unique encounter. And that's where I went with the stairs, because I was like, I don't want to do it. I think these 3 little orange marks, yeah, those 3 little orange marks are pressure plates that activated the spell. The players saw the nozzle, but they did not see the pressure plates. All of my traps are developed as such that you see either with a passive perception or a passive check, you will see either the implement or the trigger of the trap, but you won't see both. And if you see the implement with passive perception or a passive skill, then it will require an active skill check, usually a different one, to see the trigger, and then vice versa. Which is a lot of fun. Because just because you see the section of wall where the swinging blade trap exits from and returns to, doesn't mean that you know what activates that trap. And so it's a fun way of telling players that there's a trap in the room, but that you're not really, but not giving away exactly how to overcome it. So that was that. It was a really fun dungeon. I think it's going to work well. I'm going to release it to I'm going to obviously clean this stuff up here and reformat it. I'm going to include the results for, let's see here. This is the last thing I'll talk about as far as the thing here. I'll include the results for dungeon encounters, random dungeon generation, or at least the tables I feel like including for that so far. So they're probably going to go in Appendix A in the book. And underworld encounters, because those need to be attached, because you're supposed to, after you clear out this dungeon or the spot that has a layout to it, potentially going further down, because hey, maybe that's how the book is resolved. Is like you went through all of this and you still didn't find the book. That means if you went through the entire place and you still didn't find the book because you didn't roll a 20 on one of these rooms, that means that you have to keep going downwards. And there's one spot at least where it is guaranteed that you could keep going downwards, because this stretches all the way down. And that's where the referee learns how to use the Appendix A tables to continue generating rooms. And maybe they have some rooms sort of like in reserve or as a backup. And maybe not. Maybe they take a 15-minute break and say, hey, everybody go take a bathroom break, grab some food, grab some water, come back to me in 15 minutes. I'm going to have this next level prepared. Because that's realistically speaking what it's going to take, about 15 minutes. In a way that, because you don't want to my opinion, you don't want to do it one room at a time. I think that the players felt, in spite of me not having the extra contents ready for each room, I think that they felt prepared, able, and were, as a result, willing to run through all of these rooms on a wild goose chase as quickly as possible, because they knew that the doors were here, and they knew that there was something behind that door. And so even if I was generating something in the middle of this room here, realistically speaking, it could wait. Because it wasn't going to be super relevant to what the players were doing anyways, they're just running. If there's more stuff that's chasing them, that's not really going to change their tact. Their approach is still to continue running. But they felt like they could do that because there was a spot to run to. And who only people in the tabletop RPG industry would pretend to be surprised at this obvious, to my mind, blatantly obvious fact, which is, oh yeah, your players respond to environmental stimulus to take actions in the campaign, and if they are confident that there is an environment out there, they start acting. Regardless of whether or not it feels complete to them. It just, once it crosses some basic minimum threshold of stuff you could have done 15 minutes, as late as 15 minutes before the session began. Though in my case, I think it was 30. After the session began. Then I gotta be careful here, because remember, this applies to me. I'm not just criticizing my friends and the stupid amount of friendly fire that's coming over for things they're unwilling or maybe just afraid to talk about. I understand. I wouldn't want to fight me neither. But this applies to me as well. I am throwing stones in glass houses. But yeah, so that was the lesson behind this dungeon. Let's see here. Any questions from you folks? I'm gonna go refill my must get to bed. This was cool. Well, I'm happy that it was cool. Very happy it was cool. I'm going to go get some. I do not have a hold on a second, because my waiting screen does not have audio. So we're gonna go to the waiting screen, and then I'm gonna go, Alright, there we go. So Brian Winston's out for the night. See you later, buddy. Have a good one. Shoot. Alright, so who do we have left in the chat by this point? Tell me now, because I have a little spiel to go on for Warfare. I think it would be fun and entertaining. Was it 10:30? Yeah, we got time. We get time. Okay, so I started going through the warfare system today because Yusugi, who is playing Severa of House Kane in my campaign, patron. There we go. This burp's going to continue for a little while. We'll just mute for him. Playtested a pretty ideal solo wargaming scenario where it was an ambush versus, let's see here, it was his army, not his whole army. There weren't rules present for some of the unit subtypes like mounted archers, gunners, scouts. I don't think he had any gunners, but he did have scouts. He did have mounted archers, and I think he had shock troops. But none of the unit subtype stuff has made it into this document so far, which is again going to be translated to another document. Which is how I usually make progress how I usually make progress is by starting a new document and porting stuff over and getting rid of the clutter in the process. Big chillin'. But yeah, so he tested the warfare scenario. It was his unit, so he had 17 unit army, I'm pretty sure, and he brought 13 units to bear, I believe, versus a mostly undefended caravan. It was like 6 passenger wagons, 1 VIP wagon that was carrying a mage, 1 armory, and 1 prisoner or cage wagon that was holding a cobalt dragon that he's since taken prisoner. And then there were, I think, like 1 unit of cavalry, 2 units of archers, and 2 units of infantry defending it. And the passenger wagons don't attack. Their only objective is, because they can't attack, their only objective is to, and it's funny because as they start taking casualties, the passenger wagons actually get a little bit faster. They go from a movement speed of 2 to a movement speed of 3. Their only objective is to get to a little green area I marked on the map for extraction, basically, right? That's the objective, is he's ambushing these people. He doesn't want any of them to escape, because if they do escape, I was about to say, then the White Orchid Cairn, which is the faction he was attacking, the faction that this caravan belongs to, would know it was him. But realistically speaking, if 1 wagon escapes, it just means that he's going to spend an order, more or less, hunting this thing down to make sure that it doesn't do exactly that. So it wouldn't be like, it's not this game over scenario for him, or an instantaneous, oh, that's, you let 1 passenger wagon go, and therefore the entire, now all of China knows you're here. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that accent. I don't know if that was even close to an accent, but I was... Anyways. Realistically speaking, it would just be hunting down that last remaining wagon, and that would take time and resources away from his army. Now, if there were player characters in that hex or adjacent to that hex, I would absolutely roll to see if the player characters came across the last remaining wagon to either see it destroyed or while they were still alive and running away. And I would be able to track something like that by virtue of the simple... Nope. Nope. White Caravan ambush. This was the ambush. There we go. What was that? All right, we're back. Meh. All right, you can sit and be quiet here now. Come on. You want to act like a baby? You're getting baby now. Anyways, where were we? So let's see here. I don't think any wagons escaped. As I recall from the report, if that was the case, then yeah, you probably do need to hunt down that wagon. In any case, notice it was on the left side of the map, so it's escaping in the direction opposite of the White Orchid Cairn. What that means is it's not... If it's escaping opposite the area from the White Orchid Cairn, then that means it's going to have a, it's not in the best position to return to its people. So you can hunt it down. Yeah. Meow. Hey, you can be annoying all you want. It matters not. Good to stay up here. Be annoying this way. Never see Billy Rube. Anyways. But, where was I? So yeah, so we tested out these rules. It was an ideal scenario because it was very asymmetrical, very unmatched, and just an opportunity to see how the process worked out without any real pressure. And Yusugi is acting, basically, Yusugi and Brigandine have been acting like the ideal patron capacity. They always have orders ready. It's always, they're always either making moves on the map, or they're preparing game content for the players. And usually that second category falls into the first. Brigandine especially has been preparing game content for the players. It's a little harder for Yusugi, because the House Kane is, let's say, nominally opposed to the players, is nominally hostile to most of them. But that doesn't mean there's nothing that they can do. And technically speaking, if the players are allied with the White Orchid Cairn, then attacking a caravan and taking most of them prisoner is generating content for the players. That's perfect. It's not the stuff where I keep seeing this in other grand campaigns where the first thing patron players want to do is like have the referee set up a correspondence with everybody else on the map, and that's stupid. That's dumb. And it's not their fault necessarily. I understand why you would have that urge because you want to get to the fun part, which is talking to everybody, but you have to. Like, when you start on the map in Total War Warhammer, if you're doing the Immortal Empires campaign, there's 200-something factions on the map. And that's a lot for and you're maybe aware of, like, 3 of them, because they're within line of sight of the campaign. And what I had to keep telling people was, like, hey, if you want to go talk to more people, you need to expand your line of sight on the campaign. Mark on you have a map here. You have the ability to draw on it. You don't even have to upload tokens. You just have to draw on it. Tell me if you would like to go further, if you would like to extend invitations to people by putting a little guy on the map and moving him. You can meet people that way. Yeah, so we tested out the warfare rules. The Spark notes were pretty simple. Because the warfare works like this. It's a little bit similar to Chainmail, where it operates off figures. Unit types have different unit dice that they roll against each other. They're trying to beat kill. If they beat kill, then the enemy unit loses figures, health, basically, equal to the result. If it doesn't beat kill, but the roll beats morale, then what happens is the morale, the unit loses that number of figures. Basically, that number of figures break morale. And so there's this, I don't want to say complicated, but I think deep morale system that mostly focuses on the number of different intricate ways that a unit can lose morale or have it affected. Like the charming a unit functions off of morale. We have dryads in the game, right? And dryads, when they're operating as a unit, can charm a unit in melee. If they charm a unit in melee, um, the way that works is off the morale system, where it's as if they had beaten morale, and the charmed figures start fighting the uncharmed figures, and so the unit starts attacking itself until the condition is cleared, or one side or the other is dead. But what Yusugi kept finding was that he would roll, and pretty much every time he would beat morale. Or sorry, pretty much every time he would beat kill. And he was fighting using elven units, which have fewer figures overall, but have a higher casualty adjustment. So it takes more hits to actually bring down the number of figures. It's basically every time you roll against it, it's halved. Which is really interesting because my fear was that, okay, if I set the kill too high, if I set it to something like base like 9 or something like that, then every time somebody rolls a 2 through 8, nothing is going to happen to that unit except when they lose morale. If they lose morale 3 times, then you treat it as a casualty, which is another thing I took from Chainmail, specifically from the lycanthrope description of Chainmail. If you beat it back 3 times, where you get on the number but not above 3 times, you treat it as a casualty. I think it was 3 times. And, there's that again. Somebody's distracting me. Yeah, you're distracting me. Yep. Anyways. So there weren't enough interactions with the morale system, because again, I'm afraid that if I set kill to 9 and this unit of elves has 15 figures in it, then mostly nothing happens, but then 9 figures die, and that's over half of your unit. Yeah, he's being very annoying. Listen, I can multitask, relatively speaking. My viewers can tell the difference. And I'm sure they'll let me know later. But right now, this victory is... You can do nothing. But all the intricacies, as a result, all the intricacies of the morale system were going to waste. Like, at the end of each round, you're supposed to roll 4d6, and that's how many broken figures you could recover across your entire army. Probably going to adjust that somewhat, especially since I'm messing around with the numbers a little bit more now. But the whole point of the casualty system was that, or the casualty adjustment mechanic, which said, okay, it actually takes... You actually only lose 1 figure for every 2 that you're supposed to lose, right? You have it. Or you divide it by 3. In the case of higher level units, for elves specifically. The whole point of that was that you could have a higher kill stat and interact with the morale system more, way more, instead of interacting and still not worry about that high kill stat resulting in roll miss, roll hit, half the unit just died. I had already solved that problem that I was afraid of. And so Yusugi's recommendation was just to raise kill like by 1 to 2 points across the board above morale. Because like battle magic is supposed to interact with morale, mostly morale, not so much killing. Kill is supposed to be like this consistent scythe. As a statistic, is supposed to be this consistent marker of just flat-out casualties across the battlefield. And so it's okay if it's higher. Because there's already these mitigating factors that are going to keep it from just wiping out whole units in a single volley. In the exception of with the exception of battle magic, no, because battle magic works off morale. With the exception of siege engines, which are supposed to wipe off units off the map, in single turns, is fine. I already fixed that problem for myself. Bonbon Jr. says, or Bonbon JDR says, war is a high level thing, right? At that point, the players have pretty much cleansed the world of monsters and dragons. What else is a high level activity? Have a hard time running for the powerful? No, not in the slightest. I have a very easy time running for these people. You're going to get babied whether you like it or not. Oh, but you have such strong abs for such a fat cat. Meow. He loves this, by the way. This is our game every evening. Because he'll be asking for attention otherwise in a moment. But no, so war is not a high level thing. I'm recalculating the treasure tables, specifically the horde tables in my game to correspond with the cost of units, such that a CR1 horde costs roughly, or the average roll of a CR1 horde would produce the amount of money you would need to recruit a unit of infantry or archers, because they have roughly similar costs. Cavalry are about twice as expensive. Siege engines are about 3 times as expensive. And so, yeah. And then a CR2 horde would give you an average roll that would produce about 2 units worth, and so on and so on. And so I'm tying the economy back into some kind of, not realism or anything like that I don't care about, but something, hi buddy, but something that's of value to the players. And yeah, so by the time you get to war, you don't have to worry about making the game less interesting for players, because again, I know that I'm running 5th edition, but I went through and I made my own encounter manual, and I made a calculation. He shed so much, I'm just afraid of like hair dropping into my bourbon here. I think we're still good. And I mostly challenge the players through asymmetrical means, and I don't always challenge the players, is the thing. Sometimes I roll up light encounters that don't challenge the players much, and they happen to walk through them, and that's fine. Because sometimes the dice go the other way. But as a backup, I have all these asymmetrical challenges in here, like curses and diseases and armies coming to places that the players are not ready to defend or don't have defenses of their own, or that they can't meaningfully contribute to the defense of. Perfect. The next little addendum to this warfare document, once I finalize the changes that I made today, for instance, is going to be having units attack players. That's gonna be a lot of fun, because that's just, okay, this unit rolls, the unit dice of this unit is 2d6. They just roll that much damage against the players. And that's it. There's no mitigation, there's no getting rid of it. No, they just roll that damage against the players. And the players have stuff that they have, like damage mitigation. One of them has an artifact on that lets them decrease damage by an amount equal to their level. And so most units aren't going to be able to harm her specifically. Meh. Yeah, I get it. Why don't you take a seat? Come on, take a seat on the desk, but not into my bourbon. Here you go. Just chill. Just chill. Okay. She's still right there. Yeah, that's fine. Alright, he just wanted to sit by me, not on me. So yeah, so I did a few things. One is I changed the order of resolution. Missile fire was originally before move. That seems like a bad idea in retrospect. I did that because I had made charge and action. I made charge and action to where it would include a melee attack in the action. And yeah. I have cat hair. There we go. Still my mouth. I made charge and action and the melee attack, and there was some kind of interaction I was trying to preserve by keeping charge on the move action as opposed to the melee, or on the move phase as opposed to the melee phase. But I still didn't want charge to overtake missile fire. I wanted missile fire to still exceed charge and stuff like that. But I ended up just kind of scrapping that and adding movement speeds instead. So now there's movement speeds where it's stand fast, the movement makes no unit makes no movement, and heals one fatigue. Hustle is the unit moves up to its movement. March is movement plus 2, taking 1 fatigue. And charge is movement plus 3, taking 1 fatigue. Opposed units lose an additional 2 figures from casualties or morale from charging units, and units can't charge twice in a row. And obviously, I added a fatigue system, which was I remember this from Joy of Wargaming. John Mollison telling me about this. That somebody had developed this new version of chainmail, or this rewrite of chainmail that was adjusted and recodified for modern audiences, and it was missing the fatigue system. It was a really critical element that was supposed to keep people from, again, charging too often or fighting in melee for too many rounds. Just like if you're playing like Total War Warhammer, you do occasionally have to yank your units out of the melee and shove somebody else in there, because if they fight for too long, they will begin fighting less effectively. And some units are immune to that fatigue, or just naturally have better vigor, I think is the statistic in Total War Warhammer. And some of them can't lose vigor at all. It's literally perfect for them. And so you don't want your units, even if it seems like your units are doing okay at first, you don't want them to stop doing okay and then start losing very quickly. You will go into a death spiral where vigor decreases and their ability to fight decreases, and as their ability to fight decreases, their morale decreases, and then once they reach that halfway mark, as they start losing more and more people, their morale decreases way faster, and it does go into a death spiral, which is exactly what I want for this system that I'm using here. I want it to be like Total War Warhammer, because that was the easiest wargaming that I ever got into. Or sorry, that was not the easiest wargaming that I ever got into. That was the most welcoming wargaming that I ever got into. And by God, I sure do. I just love playing Wood Elves. So I went into the movement system. I had a fatigue. Fatigue is very simple. If you take casualties while you have fatigue, you take extra casualties. Whether that's from broken morale whether you lose additional figures equal to your fatigue whenever you would lose a figure, whether it's due to casualties or broken morale. Very simple. If you arrive to the enemy and you have 2 fatigue and they score a hit on you, you lose an extra 2 figures. Simple. Very simple. Might replace another statistic. I have not decided. I also started adding little tags to the various actions that you could take. And in what phase these actions happen. So attack, I put a little note for myself there because that still needs to be changed. Fortify is on the morale phase, and that's at the very bottom of the round. So the unit rolls 1d6, reduces the number of the next reduces the next figures lost to casualties or broken morale equal to the result. That happens at the very end of the round. So theoretically, they could fortify and be hidden or something like that, and then they go off into the next round, and they could be it could be something where they're in the middle of a melee and they're trying to prepare themselves, or they're hidden and they're getting ready for an ambush and they want to make sure they're a little bit better defended, stuff like that. Split happens on the movement phase, withdrawal happens on the movement phase, stuff like that. So I think this is, yeah. And then we have some conditions here. Broken, not to be confused with broken figures. A unit is automatically considered broken when, where's my ponytail there? When its number of broken figures exceeds other figures in the unit, and then units are cleared of the broken condition when the number of broken figures no longer exceeds that of other figures in the unit. And then that's just supposed to specify that, like, hey, if you're broken, that's also supposed to specify that broken people continue fleeing off the map. And then there should be an additional, I think, following the Total War example, there should be an additional condition here called Shattered, which is you've been broken for X number of rounds, or you took casualties X number of times while you were broken. You just keep running back across the map. You're done. That unit's done. It's out. For unit statistics, we have, let's see here. You notice that most of the kill and morale are either 2 or 1 apart. And the reason I did that initially was because most of the morale was pretty low to begin with. But most people get a +1. Here's the thing. When you start factoring in ancestry, most of these people get bonuses mostly to morale. And some of them also get bonuses to kill, but most of them are, again, it's mostly to morale. And so what you get is, like, if you have all right, human, we have human infantry here. All right? If we have human infantry, humans get a +1 bonus to morale. And that means that our kill is 6 and our morale is brought up to 5. So there's literally just a difference of 1 between, for human infantry, between whether you ever even engage with the morale system. And that's probably bad, because humans have a specific trait for, if I scroll down here, I don't know if it's on this document. Camaraderie. This is supposed to be a human-only trait. The unit gains a +1. Oh wait, no, that's a different thing. Okay. I was thinking Matt Colville's system where humans get to succeed on a morale check once per battle. Are there any cat hair in this? I'm carefully scanning for any cat hair. I think we're good. And I was afraid, because I was like, oh, come on, there's going to be a casualty. Normally, elves are the only ones that start off with casualty adjustments. They start off with a 2-2. Maybe they should start off with a 1-1. Once a unit reaches level 3, or experience 3, they get an additional 1-1 casualty adjustment, so we'll see. But yeah, so people are already catching up in terms of, just by the way I made this, people are already catching up. I don't think that dwarves really need a +3 to morale. I think they could probably just start off with a +2, and I think that if I wanted to bump some of these numbers up, I think even if some of these numbers were really high, like we have cavalry, morale 6, kill 7. I think if that morale was, I think I could justify, because they have 3d6 for unit dice instead of 2d6. They're really strong in a headlong engagement, and they're expensive. I think I could justify putting this up to at least a 9. And what that means is, for kill, what that means is, off the bat, you might have somebody who has a kill of 11. That's going to be rough. That's going to be rough to deal with. But there's already rules in this document for attacking the same unit with multiple units. You could have 2 different archer units attack at the same time at a single given unit of cavalry, let's say. Instead of rolling, normally archers are 2d6, instead of rolling that, you're rolling 4d6 instead, because they have 2 units firing at them. And you can use that cumulative bonus to overcome higher kill statistics. And even if you're not in a situation where you could do that, you can split the unit. That's an action. To have the figures occupying a position move to an adjacent position within 1 move, they lose cohesion, but they count as a separate unit for attacking because they're more spread out and they're able to, like, kind of, if they go into kind of like a semicircle formation, they can start firing down on this cavalry. They're going to be more effective as a result. Fantastic. So again, basically the thing that I was most afraid of, which is people rolling against a single unit and finding that they could never roll high enough to beat kill, was something that was not only okay in theory. So I've cut hair on my face. Not only was this something that wasn't really a fail state for the system, but something that I had already built like 5 different safeguards, and that's not me overestimating. I literally built like 5 different safeguards against that happening into the system. And if through player choices or patron choices, or just the natural progression of battle, that happens to happen anyway. That happens anywhere where you have a virtually unkillable cavalry unit going around the battlefield. And nobody is rolling it even above morale for some reason, and every time a unit splits, they get wiped off the map because their cohesion goes down, and they get attacked, and so their cohesion goes down again. When you reach 0 cohesion, you get wiped out. Maybe that sticks around, maybe that doesn't. So mostly there's a statistic for 2 reasons. One is the quick battles version of these rules, and 2 for giants to interact with. I wanted special rules for giants. Chainmail has special rules for giants. I should have special rules for giants. I'm okay designing like that. I'm confident that there was something there. I figured one out. Yeah, even if you end up with like this unkillable unit somewhere on the battlefield, like, man, that's probably okay. That's probably okay. If through the result of play and good sportsmanship, one unit ends up on the battlefield through play, good sportsmanship, and maybe circumstance, ends up being almost unkillable, to the point where the other units that would have opposed it are getting wrapped up or tied up or chased off the battlefield by something else. That's how the game should go. That's how the game should work. And that's after accounting for those, again, these 5 other safeguards that I prepared for it. So I just need to stop being a bitch about it and just increase all of these by 2. Maybe not siege engines. The siege engines have morale of 3 and they have a kill of 7. I think it's okay to leave that probably as is. Yeah. That's probably okay. There's her literally covering the outside of the glass. Where's the special rule for tiny people? No special rule for tiny people yet. No rules for hobbits in here. Wait, no, that's a lie, actually. There is a rule for tiny people. It applies to goblinoids, and it applies to boggarts, because we have fantastic ancestries in here. Because what is my ode to chainmail if it does not have fantastical ancestries that act as their own unit types, with one particular exception? And some non-particular exceptions. Some fantastical ancestries can be recruited as subtypes, resembling typical units. I think that's mostly naiads and nixies. Can be recruited as special cavalry units. But boggarts here, these little bastards. Where is it? Where's Horde? There it is. The unit can take the split action without suffering any penalties to cohesion. Which means they can take an action, split around you, so now they're surrounding you, and if you happen to be engaged... Uh-oh. It sucks. Oh well. Done drinking tonight. You split this around you, so now you can't escape without taking action of your own, and you're still probably going to take some casualties. Because if you run away, you'll be getting attacked by 2 units instead of 1. And they already have a lot of figures, so boggarts have 40. My base is, so for the fantastical ancestries, I just put how many they have. The regular ancestries, it's determined by the unit, and then there's a modifier here. So, goblinoids, plus 20. And my base for infantry is 20. So, there's now 20 goblins on either side of you. They are no less threatening by virtue of having split up because they're used to fighting as a... They're so expendable and they're so easy to kill, but they are used to fighting as a mass. And it's happy to ruin your day. And after surrounding you, they just... It's just over. Unless you have, like, siege engines peppering them before they get to you, or you have some cavalry that can wheel on their flank and start murdering them there to hopefully whittle them down enough that the resulting casualties you take don't knock the unit effectively out of combat. You're screwed. So those are the changes I need to finish up there. I would also like to, I think tomorrow I'm going to finish this. I'm going to do the... Yeah, I'm not going to worry about ancestries for the moment. I'm going to finish up the unit subtypes. There we go. Going to finish up the unit subtypes. Might do some army or unit traits and their costs, but it's really hard to do costs for some of these things. Yeah, it really is hard to figure out, like, what is the price of having forest protection? I don't know if that's, like, a thing that you pay for. I think that's a thing that, like, you have to... I think you just need some dryads or tree men to join your party in order to convey that benefit onto your armory, or to bless it in some way, you know? Trample the gobos with your hooves. Yeah, that's one way you could do it. Well, your system of templates, like the 3.5 monster templates, except for units. So, I think the answer is partially yes. Like, guys, so I don't think you were here earlier in the stream, but one of my intentions is to, after this stuff is cleaned up, I would like an addendum to this warfare section for units for asymmetrical warfare. So units attacking a bunch of, like, less than CR1 goblins attack the party as a unit. What happens? What I think happens is the players deal damage to the goblins, and the goblins lose figures as a result. And the goblins roll their unit dice. And regardless of what would normally happen or not happen, we're skipping the attack roll portion. When the goblins roll their unit dice, the players just take that damage. They just eat that damage. They roll 2d6, we got a 7, disconnected. I think I'm still disconnected. This would be funny. Are we reconnected yet? Alright, now we're reconnected. Okay, it's a good thing I wasn't saying anything important. As far as the second part of your question goes, so yes, we will have like generic rules for these are units. We already have templates for the most common humanoids, and here's what happens when they attack the party members. I would be interested, because I am going back through the encounter manual, and I am kind of restructuring some things to make it look better. But that's low on the priorities list. I would be interested in adding small warfare, just like I did for parlay, taming, binding, useful components, and just learning about these creatures in general. Little sections for each one, because I made each of these little sections for almost every single monster in the book, just because it made it easier to write them for. Like, it's a lot easier to come up with a description for a creature once you move past the aesthetics of it, what the creature looks like, or this is the creature's purpose in-game. Here is how you parlay with a Domavist. Well, what the hell is a Domavist? Well, it's a little guy, he carries a hammer around, and he likes making stuff. He's a fey dwarf, basically. Alright, and he's tiny, or he's a fey gnome, except the gnomes are already kind of fey. He's a house hob, except we already have house hobs. Well, here's some little mechanics for how you could convince a Domavist how to join your forge and start making items for you. And here's what happens if you're successful. Okay, well now the Domavist, as a monster, exists primarily to fill that mechanical niche. Or to embody that set of mechanics. Or to provide, or to be that encounter where players are trying to find a master smith. It's like, out of nowhere, I am reminded of the Witcher 3 quest. There's 2 different Witcher 3 quests where you have to find a master armorer or grandmaster armorer. Is it a master? I think it's a master armorer and a master swordsmith. When you find the master swordsmith, he's making dumplings in his restaurant because he can't find materials anywhere, and people are threatening to squeeze him out of the market. So he makes more money selling dumplings instead of swords now. But he wants to get back into the quest. There's a creature in my encounter manual embodying that purpose. I would love to go back through. I don't think I realistically have time for this. But that's easy to say when you're 2 years late, realistically speaking. And there's that again. And don't have a co-writer, and don't have any support staff, and just have like your playtesting that you're doing in your campaign to catch up little by little. I see you. See again. But yeah, so something I would like to do for individual monsters or individual critters, I don't think it's going to happen. Not for this game. For a different game, yes. But not for Chilmus Valley. Chilmus Valley, I raised $5,000. It was cool that I raised $5,000 for a product that had most of the concept done, but didn't have the individual writing done. It was being written primarily by 2 people who were very high concept and did not want to write a lot of specifics. I'm glad I got over that when it came to one, writing the encounter manual, two, structuring the learning how to write grand campaigns, and then translating that advice into the how to run section for Chilmus Valley and for the various books, and then down to the various quests that I'm writing for Chilmus Valley, and when I wrote Seven Willows. Speaking of which, if there's any Seven Willows backers in the chat watching this ahead of time, so I know that Dorian's in here. I'm still waiting on ShipBob to get back to me when it comes to shipping the physical books. If I don't hear from them in, let's see here, by the time of my next paycheck, I guess, because at that point I'll be done with this. I'm just going to ship everything through media mail. Because I'm done going back and forth over the cost of a one-time shipment. It's basically the issues I was having with the printer all over again. Yeah, I think the next time, because here's the thing, I would love actually to kickstart another. I'd love to kickstart another zine next February, but I just don't think it's gonna. I just don't think it's gonna happen. What I am going to do is I'm going to send out revised copies of Seven Willows to all the backers as a thank you. I think I only had like 50 something. And the printer I eventually settled on, God, they make books for so cheap, and really nice books too. Like the color on they haven't broken yet. They've been sitting in a box in my room for some time now. But they haven't broken, they haven't snapped or anything like that. And God, the color they did not skip out on the ink. Let me tell you, the colors pop so much on those books, and that's good because Star 2 are fantastic artists, and I think I did a pretty good job on the cover. And the font itself has a pretty vibrant color to it. It's like a teal against a mostly purple background, which hopefully won't kill your eyes. It's art punk, so I felt like I had to do something. I felt like I had to make one stupid layout choice at least to cement my design or plant my flag, but we'll see what happens there. But yeah, so that's the warfare feedback. I don't have anything else at the moment. Let's see here. It sounds like a fun system. Yeah, it was pretty. It is a pretty fun system as far as warfare goes. I wish I was using it more often. I would love to be able to restart this. I'd love to be able to restart Chilmus Valley, like the campaign itself, and go back and basically replay or retest all of the. Yeah, all of the like book one, the quests that were supposed to be in book one, book two, or just making them available in book one, book two, respectively. Now that so many of the systems are more together and ready and prepared, I would love to run Chilmus Valley one last time. And I think I have a mechanism for doing it. Like I would love maybe at the basically the beginning of the new year, saying, okay, because we're past the 1 year anniversary of this campaign. And people have been loving it. And realistically speaking, there's only... Who would I have to ask if this is okay with? Alright. Santo is pretty new. Nessie and Autostar have been here for the better part of a year. Bar has been here for at least 6 months, maybe 8 months at this point. Landy has been here since session 1, I'm pretty sure. There's Caleb playing Morgan, and his gal Sienna. Let's see here. Robin's not really interested in grand campaigns or West Marches. They don't feel it's a good fit for them. So he's out. And he's been out for a while. And there's a few other people who are like basically the most common joiners, or the most common players, we'll say, who I would feel compelled to ask permission from, basically. But besides them, I think between those players who I would have to ask permission from, yeah, because Altan, Armorin, and Orville have not been in the campaign for at least 6 months now. I do want to bring them back because I think it would be a lot of fun. And there's a few new players from the Euros. They haven't been super present, but I would love to see them again. But realistically speaking, the number of people I would have to ask permission from would be less than 10 to do some kind of time jump or skip back or something that justified us going back in time to the beginning of this campaign. And screw it, I'd let them operate with their knowledge about like what kind of about where the different items were and where the different things on the map were. I might let them keep their items. I don't know. That seems tricky. I don't know if I should dump 15th level characters back into the world. But maybe I should. They're not going to level that fast anyways, and they already have a bunch of items. I don't know. I really don't know. But now, like, the exploration system is more solidified. The exploration system is basically done. There's a few things I would like to edit there and clean up, but that's on the wish list, right? It's not really on the list of things that are necessary. It's more on the wish list. And then there's all these other mechanics that have been settled since, and I just think it would probably be better if I restarted the campaign now that we have like the full encounter manual, and I have my system for converting existing monsters from the monster manual, Bolo's Guide to Monsters, any of the third-party supplements, Morning Cadence, Time of Foes, stuff like that. I'm bringing them in line with Children's Valley by mostly nuking the hit points and then adjusting the 2 hit bonuses upwards. I think it's so tricky. Like, would I get more out of the... Now that I've run these quests, would I get more out of them running them again? Or now that I have these mechanics solidified, would I get more out of incorporating them into the beginning of the campaign? Or would it just kill the momentum? Because the people who were playing most felt like everything had been kind of, I don't know, diminished or stolen out from under them. I think the best way I could answer that question is the best way for me to get around that, because my next big tabletop, when I say big, I mean big tabletop RPG product, works off of, this is like 2025, works off of this warfare system. That's the Lords of Smaid thing. That's the 2d6, 1 Lord, and their 11 retainers. You're every player controlling a party of 12 together, journeying throughout the fantasy, not science fantasy, just fantasy, journeying throughout the stars and finding fantasy traveler, basically. Yeah. I, I could, if I wanted to, if I really wanted to, quote, restart the campaign, I think it would be probably best to do that after this campaign itself was finished. Playtest the remainder of the quests, all the ones that I have next to me at the very least, and then just do it all again. I have plenty of narrative excuses to do it, but I don't think it would be good for me to do this before the campaign had actually completed. I would need some way of like preserving it in my players' minds that they had in fact beaten the campaign. And this time loop or this illusory campaign happening afterwards was for some other purpose. But I don't think it would be right of me to even ask them, because they might be down for it initially, and then you get 3 months into it, it's like, this sucks. I feel like I already know what's going to happen. And even if it's not true, they feel like it. That's not good. It just wouldn't be good. I don't think I could justify doing that in the middle of this campaign. I could justify doing it at the end of the campaign and saying, all right, here's this villain presses the reset button. How long would it take CMV to end if I kept going? Right now we're just kind of doing quest and monster of the week stuff. I would give it another 4 months. Yeah, I would give it another 4 months. And then during those 4 months, I could have the patrons, some of them reprising their original roles, but having a new roster of patrons to enter the game from the beginning. So yeah, so we begin, because I'll probably speed run the players through the rest of the ballads, the ones that haven't been completed already. And they've completed a fair few, to be fair to them, they've completed a fair few on their own already. There's just a few more that I would like them to basically playtest that I haven't determined or rolled for them completing already. Ballads are a specific kind of quest. We'll go into that in a different stream. But I think it would be, yeah. And then we'd lead up to either, probably the final confrontation would either be with Zafane, or the final confrontation would be with a creature living where a comet landed about a century ago. Yeah, that would be the idea. I mean, the players have expressed interest in assisting the big bad evil guy with his campaign. Or sorry, with his ballad specifically. Because there's a special quest called Citron's Fiesta where the party stumbles into getting a party which includes all of the major Fey lords of Chomas Valley, good or evil, and there's an opportunity to, and the players took this. There's an opportunity in that party. Writing social encounters is kind of difficult for me in systems like 5th edition. I feel like I need systems that have social encounters built into them from the ground up. I mean, really built into them from the ground up to actually run them properly. But the players did have fun getting drunk with the main villain of the campaign. They were particularly excited by that. And they got to figure out his ballad, and his ballad is actually quite sweet. It's like he's a surrogate Santa Claus for the valley. It's very certain facets of the campaign I definitely took from. I was stealing from mythology and fables all over, but a few of them were a little bit more modern than others, and I would be lying if I said that C.S. Lewis didn't make at least a little bit of an impression on me as a kid. What happened over there? Did you die? Died. Okay. Yeah, so that's the idea. I think that's where the stream's going to end. I don't have much else to talk about here. I'm gonna put the waiting screen on for like 2 minutes. Ask any of the questions you guys wish when you come back. I'm happy to answer as many as you want. But yeah, that's where we're. Matt, I think I talked about everything that I wanted to talk about tonight. Well, not everything. I talked about the two main topics I wanted to talk about tonight. And I think there's a lot of good clips and snippets in this that I will later listen to at 2x speed. I can't listen to myself on 1x speed. I have to listen at least at like 1.25 or 1.5x. And sometimes when I remind myself of that fact, I end up speaking faster, a little bit more in a how do I put this in a more attentive or reinforced no aggressive tone. Aggressive. Maybe aggressive is the wrong word. Maybe it's just energetic, but an energetic tone to go through. But yeah, that's the idea. All right, so I'm going to go back to the waiting screen. I'll be back in 2 minutes, and I'll answer any questions remaining, and then I will sign off. I've been going for like 2.5 hours, which is a fantastic amount of time, and I feel like I got to talk about it a lot today. I got to talk about writing in a context that I wasn't even prepared for. I don't know which you guys were around for that, but the subject of redlining my book and redlining my comic book, which I would love to. I don't know if I want to remake my book. I would love to remake my comic book. Because that's a joint exercise with other creatives, and other creatives who are specifically better than me, and can kind of carry my bad writing with their fantastic art. That's interesting, but I'll get back to that when I get back. And I was muted. Cool. Cool, cool. During sleep says, no questions, but I'm happy to hear your notions. Always happy to have you here, man. I hope to get those books out to you soon. Like I said, at this point, I'm probably just going to use USPS media mail to get them out to you. Because it seems like ShipBob is more for people who are sending out consistent orders. And right now, that's not me. I just printed 42 of those books. Wasn't really much more to go around there. But that's caused me a lot of problems and delayed the release of the book pretty unnecessarily. But I think people have been fine playing either solo or whatever with themselves. But that also reminds me, I need to get the cards out. Because the cards, I don't think that people really want them. Obviously, I have to get them out in a physical format, but unlike the book, which you can get out in a PDF format and kind of like tide people over, I don't think that that's the same with cards. I don't think that works. I don't know, maybe. Like I said earlier, I'm going to re-release the physical book as an apology for this taking so long. And it's not me being magnanimous or anything like that. I mean, it is a little bit. But when I eventually found the appropriate printer, it was only like $100 to print out all 42 copies that have been ordered. And then it's once those shipped out, that was totally fine. And then it was just a matter of coordinating with somebody who was going to with another third-party company who was going to ship it for me, which I thought was going to be ShipBob, but again, no cigar. But yeah, I think maybe next stream we'll do the redlining of my book and comic book. Maybe. Or maybe it'll be another prep stream. I really like my prep streams because I feel like I get so much done on those. I get to talk about the design of the game or the module I'm working on or some deeper truth about game design and or about video games or something else, and it seems like so much fun. I wanna lean into that. I definitely want to lean into that. But besides that, thank you guys so much for hanging out. It's been going now for like 2 hours and 45 minutes. I'm gonna play a couple of video games before I go to bed, get ready for work in the morning, and then I shall see you some other time. Thanks again.